Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about, as you can see, Picard Season 3 specifically, Episode 10. Granted, it's been about a day to 2 days since it's passed. For those who haven't seen the episode, spoilers, there are going to be spoilers, so I suggest you don't watch this until after you watch the episode. Because I'll be making some references to certain things, unless of course you've already seen some parts of social media, or like some people have been posting certain things already about it, which are certain spoilers as well too, which kind of sucks, and they don't really say, hey, spoilers, whatever it may be. But anyways, like TikTok and YouTube Shorts. But anyways, today's episode, basically, our episode 10, was pretty interesting. Brings back a lot more nostalgia, to be quite honest, more than anything else. I mean, the whole season so far has been a case where, like, I think when it opened up in the first episode of the season, there were some nostalgic scenes at that point, making references to all some of the TNG episodes and such. And then also the aspect of throughout the entire season, it was making references to Enterprise, the series Enterprise, Voyager, as well as DS9. Basically, almost the entire Star Trek universe in a ways, except for the Kelvin timeline, practically. Unless they're going to make that reference eventually, hopefully, down the line, or Discovery for that matter. But in any case, they were making a lot of references to the point where, you were seeing the plot line. In the beginning, you're not sure where it was, but then eventually you're like, okay, hey, look, it's an actual old, sort of adversary in the past, which was referencing basically, DS9 with the Dominion and more specifically the Changelings more than anything else, and how they were bringing it in. And you're not sure what they were trying to do as far as, you could see that they were trying to do something to start, Starfleet, basically, as well as, all of humankind and the remaining Alpha Quadrant. More than anything else. And it was more of a case where, like, you were seeing essentially how it sort of referenced, especially the fact that you saw Ensign Ro 2 episodes ago as well too. Again, a lot of old Star Trek characters from some of the old episodes basically coming in, basically, or some of the guest characters that it seems like there was a continuation sort of type of thing, more not a continuation, but more of a different iteration of a TNG episode or episodes where it involved a conspiracy, where Starfleet was some of the top echelon in Starfleet was infiltrated by an alien species, more like kind of like a centipede type of centipede alien or something like that, where they embed themselves as a host into the host of the humanoid forms, and then basically we're trying to take over the guy, the quadrant, it seems. Of course, Captain Picard and the rest of the Enterprise crew basically saves the day, saves the universe, or saves the quadrant, whatever it may be. But it seems like this episode 10 basically was showing that up to episode 10 and parts of episode 1 was showing basically it was like sort of an extended aspect of or not an extended, but more of an extended iteration of that, with the changelings infiltrating Starfleet, and basically to the point of handling all of the upper aspects of Starfleet, but more so other areas of Starfleet as well too, and like some of the ships, whether it be captains or first officers or some form of leadership role, and sometimes non-leadership roles, of course, as well too, but more of creating a sort of what we thought would be a conspiracy, but turning out to be something more of like creating another aspect of control for of the humanoid species, more specifically humans or Starfleet in this case, and it was kind of interesting. But more specifically to the point where, in this case, where you have the Dominion, the changelings themselves, where they were hard to determine, or hard to, I guess you could say, isolate and determine who was a changeling and who wasn't a changeling. Back in the past, you could just do a scan and basically they would determine basically if you don't have blood, changeling. This case, doing a DNA scan, they came so relatively close that you had to actually like go into the organs and such to determine like okay, they were changing. So they had sort of, in a ways, evolved based on, or mutated more than anything else. I think not evolved, but more of a mutation from the aspect of like through experimentation that Starfleet did onto some of these changelings that they'd captured, of course, and going from there. So that was one aspect that was interesting in that perspective, and like how the changelings of that were mutated, as well as all the changelings and the dominions were showing how Starfleet was willing to essentially do mass genocide, an eradication of a species by introducing, but it was really more Section 9 more than anything else, or Section 31, sorry, more than anything else, of like trying to introduce a virus to the changeling, to the foundlings, or founders, sorry, not foundlings, founders, to the point where the founders themselves introduced into the Great Link, specifically into Otto itself, and then when he merged with the Great Link initially, he passed on that genetic virus basically, which would basically degrade them at that point until Otto was cured, and then he passed on that cure to the rest of the Great Link at that point as well too. But of course, to the aspect it was like known that the changelings did not forget. They remembered, like, this is a species that was willing to eradicate an entire species, whereas the changelings founders, more than anything else, and the Dominion more than anything else, was willing to not eradicate the species, the humans or all the Alpha Cadres, but more of like take them under their control, more of actually removing their freedom of will, basically, like the Jem'Hadar, what they did with the Jem'Hadar. And then, of course, then there was references during the entire season as well, too, specifically with Picard and with the captain of the Titan at that point, where, he was referencing being during the Borg Wars, when Picard was Locutus. Also, so a semi-reference also back to DS9, where Cisco saw, like Locutus killing his wife. And in this case, with Titan, basically, the captain of the Titan, basically, seeing all his crewmates being an engineer, all his crewmates dying because of Locutus at that point. And so it made reference to, the Borg aspect of things for Picard. And then we saw, of course, from there, with Locutus, you kind of saw that, Jack Crusher being the son and all that stuff, but you weren't sure what was going on with him, because you saw certain things going on where he's able to control people. So, and the changeling, the founders, or changeling in this case, want him because they know that he's a vital piece to their plan. But you're not sure what's going on, because there are some aspects where he's able to sense things, but also having not a Great Link aspect, but more of not a Great Link to the Great Link of the founders, but more of a link to something else. And you're like wondering what these pieces of threads were, basically. And then, of course, this episode explains a hell of a lot at that point, quite honestly, to the point where, like, you see, being the son of Picard, that a lot of references of what he was basically to the point of him being a reference to the Borg, essentially, and like him being a Borg, which comes back to the point of, essentially being the Borg, that you've got Locutus, where while Picard was Locutus, it wasn't an aspect of, when they took control of him, but there was other aspects as well, too, where, it was kind of surprising, like, after Picard was removed from the Borg, as, rescued from the Borg, and, like, all the implants removed and such, that there was no psychological or physical aspects that were responsible. But it came to the point where, like, in the First Contact movie, somehow, some way, Picard still had some aspects of hearing the Borg, which is surprising, and like no one could understand why, because like all the implants were removed, so why would he still be able to hear the Borg? Whereas with 7 and 9 in Voyager, she wasn't really truly able to entirely. She was severed from the link, and so was Picard, but yet he was able to still sense it. And this episode explained why he was able to the point where, like, it turns out what it was is basically the Borg basically rewrote parts of his DNA. And one of those aspects of rewriting the DNA was iridium syndrome, basically, which was a byproduct of it. So everyone thought the syndrome, like iridium syndrome was hereditary, but it turns out it wasn't hereditary. It was more of a case where this was a byproduct of the Borg rewriting his genes, being part Borg at that point as well, too. So the thing is like, you got Picard basically being part Borg, which means basically, the Borg themselves are in control in ways. And you didn't really think the Borg would be coming back, but they are. And you're seeing Jack Crusher now actually being Borg because he inherited his father's genes, which basically means he has the Borg genes as well, too, within him. And you're thinking, okay, that's pretty much it. I'm like, that explains a lot. And like the fact is, like, but the question is like, you're seeing him able to control people, like some individuals within the show, within the series. And you're wondering, like, how is he able to control it? Because like the Borg are not able to, unless they're able to inject nanobites onto their prey, basically, practically, or their victims. And then they're able to control with the mind collective at that point. And so the question is like, how is he able to do that? And you're not really able to figure that out until you realize that what it was is basically not only the fact that Jack is a Borg kind of transmitter, which we find out later he is a transmitter. It's more of a case where like now there's a case where Data and Geordi are saying now, like in reality, what was going on, and this is a case with the Borg as well as maybe the Changelings or the Founders, more specifically the Changelings, that this is a case where they became the long game. They played the long game, where essentially why they infiltrated all of Starfleet, the Changelings, they were also putting in code within the transporters that every individual that was transported or used a transporter, their genes were rewritten to include parts of the base gene of Picard, basically as a humanoid, and those base genes, meaning, and mind you, when we're saying the base genes of what we saw, like a reference against the TNG episode, where like all humanoid life derived from this one set, basically, where like the Kardashians, Klingons, humans, Romulans, etc., Vulcans, etc., they all derived from this one species, and so all of them had that base gene, and so basically taking that base gene off of from specifically everyone in the Alpha Quadrant, taking that base gene from Picard, and basically implanting it into the base code, into the code base of the transporters, to the point where like everyone that was being transported, those base genes were being rewritten into everyone's DNA. And so now you're wondering, okay, so Jack Crusher, that explains how Jack Crusher is able to kind of control some of these people, but not to a point of like anyone that's over the age of 25, because apparently it only affects anyone under the age of 25 and under, basically, to the point where like it's basically the frontal cortex, whatever it may be. But whatever that case, it was interesting. And I was like, okay, that's really impressive that the writers were thinking of this, to the point like the Borg and Changelings were thinking of the long game and trying to do this of infiltration as well as control at that point. So the real question is, who actually is the true antagonist here? Is it the Changelings or is it the Borg? Because like if it's the Borg, do they have control of the Changelings? And I've always wondered, to be quite honest, in DS9, when the Changelings were the Dominion, more specifically, were attacking, were at war with the Alpha Quadrant, I wondered, like, if the Borg were ever introduced into DS9, would they? Why not go from the Delta Quadrant into the Gamma Quadrant and like take over the Changelings? Would they have assimilated the Changelings? If they could, it'd be interesting to see. Or could they, for that matter? Or could the Changelings sort of rewrite the code base of the Borg by assimilating them, etc., basically, whatever it may be. But in any case, it's more of a case of now it's hard to determine who's the actual antagonist here. It could be both, basically, in this case, but more so to the point where like it comes down to the aspect of there's that perspective, but then there's also the perspective of like they introduced lore back with Data, which was really interesting in itself as well too. Like, all right, lore is back, and remember with lore, before he was deactivated, his last known acts was basically to control and be the Borg leader. So the fact that lore is brought back, I'm like, just before the season episode 9, before episode 10, you're like, okay, lore and Data were basically two split personalities coming together, basically, and mind melding or merging into, or more of a case of fusion. And I'll make reference to this a little bit later, when we're fused together to becoming a new entity, basically, but still retain the parts of Data himself, basically. And that kind of reminded me of the case of, like, I think they probably stole some aspects of Dragon Ball Z a little bit, where with Dragon Ball Z, you had the Namekian fusion, not the actual fusion dance with, like, Goku and Vegeta, but more of, like, Piccolo, when he merged with Nail and then, eventually Kami, to the point where, like, when they all merged, you took the best of, but also you retained the stronger entity, basically the stronger entity was retained at that point, which in this case would be Piccolo. So it was kind of interesting to see, like, it was almost the same case with Data, basically. And it also made sort of a reference to a little bit of reference to, as well as the Matrix with Neo and Agent Smith, where Smith assimilated him, and then eventually, and Neo basically was letting him be himself assimilated by Smith, Same thing with Data, and then eventually, Neo took over Smith, but he didn't retain his entities or retain his parts of Smith. He just disintegrated Smith. Whereas at least with Data and Lord, Laura was removed, but at the same time, some parts of Laura were there to the point where like he had Data now has the human emotion aspects that Laura has that Data didn't have outside of the chip itself. And I was like kind of curious, like why wasn't the chip put in place at that point? But then I realized Data was destroyed, so the chip is gone. So it's more of a case where like now he's back to it, but with the synthetic body at that point as well too. So that was interesting from that perspective. And like the fact that again, Jack being able to rewrite, not being able to rewrite, but his genes being rewritten to the point where like he's able to control, and like he is more of a transmitter, a much larger transmitter for the Borg, that he met up with the Borg Queen or Borg themselves, became the transmitter to like essentially assimilate all the Starfleet cadets and Starfleet officers that were under the age of 25 that went through the transport. I mean, everyone's gone through the transporters, that they were all taken, and to the point where they became the new Borg. And it was interesting enough as well to, in reference to episode 10 as well, to Admiral Shelby, if you were now going back to the Locutus episode as well, to the point where Admiral Shelby is basically the one that basically was First Officer Shelby, and she basically was creating a protocol for all the ships to be working as in unison at one point or another, so that at that point they become sort of Borg-like. So seeing that it was a precursor to being Borg-like, and like Riker even referencing like like if it's not Borg, you could see it right now. And then at that point, the fact that you could see that everyone else became Borg at that point, that at that situation, everything, all ships of that nature that was upgraded and tied to the mainframe became Borg at that point, where they were controlled, and now they were going to be attacking whatever. I mean, we'll see next episode at that point. But it was interesting from how that worked in that perspective. But then seeing is how 7 and 9 was there, and you kind of wondered, like, not all of her implants were removed per se. At least I don't think so, because she still has the neural cortex basically that's still stuck in there basically. And so it's kind of wondering, like, how come Jack couldn't control her? Is it because of the fact that it was that there's inhibitors in place that prevents it? If that's the case, why not just apply it to everyone else? But that's a different topic altogether. But more so now, to the point where everyone else of the TNG crew escaping, leaving behind Rava and 7 of 9, that they go back to the museum, of course. And then I think, of course, the spoilers, but this is what I think, of course, the writers of Star Trek Picard in episode 3 was bringing back nostalgia again, and they bring back the Enterprise D, which was pretty interesting itself too. And like, I was like, it brought back a lot of nostalgia at that point as well too, to be quite honest. I'm like, oh, okay, this is great. I mean, granted, everyone was like, wait, D was destroyed in Generations, but they say basically, like, Jordy even says like, well, yes, but at the same time, we were able to retain the saucer section because of the fact that for the Prime Director. So like he was able to restore parts of it, or a large portion of it, for 20 years basically, and then parts of the bodies was from other starships as well too, and like other scraps that were similar class at that point. And then the one thing that threw me off, which made a reference to the Enterprise E, and I'm like, okay, and like something happened with the Enterprise E. I'm like, wait, I don't remember anything happening with the Enterprise E, because Enterprise E still survived Star Trek Nemesis. So I'm like, wait, I'm a little confused, like what happened with E? And then everyone looks at Worf, and like Worf saying it's not my fault, and I'm like, wait, I don't understand. Granted, apparently there's some canon out there where Worf became the captain of Enterprise E, and then something happened within 2 or 3 weeks where it was destroyed. I don't know if it's part of canon or non-canon. It's basically in literature or something like that. So that's why I'm not sure of, unless they're going to explain it down the line, like maybe 1 or 2 more episodes down the line to figure it out. But it's going to be interesting to see how this works out. With episode 11, but it shows the fact that like they are bringing a lot of nostalgia back as well too. Now the question is like, if they're bringing this back, and the fact that Crusher does make Beverly Crusher does make reference to Wesley, makes me wonder, because the fact is we saw in season 2, the last episode, the last few scenes of Picard season 2, Wesley Crusher comes back and like basically takes the synthoid in a way, or the clone and, as part of the ongoing journey. So it makes me wonder, is like, will Wesley Crusher make an appearance in the final, because this is the final season of Picard. I mean, the final season, the final season, basically the series will end. Will there be reference to, Wesley Crusher in this episode? I mean, we do see him also at one point in First Contact, in Nemesis, with Riker and Deanna getting married, and it was kind of weird seeing, like, Wesley Crusher there. I'm like, wait, isn't he supposed to be out over in space and everything like that? And, like, essentially Beverly is saying basically, I lost Wesley to space, and now I'm losing Jack to, practically the same thing, but to the Borg in this case. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Jack Crusher and the Borg, but it'll be interesting to see if will Wesley Crusher come back and maybe help out in some aspects. I mean, I think he should in ways. We know Q's already pretty much dead or dying at this point, so he's not going to do anything about this. The real question is will we see Cisco? Will there be an emergence of a Cisco at this point? Because you have Jake Cisco, but you have Commander Captain Cisco, and it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Because, I mean, we saw that, he went into an ethereal plane with the Prophets. Could he make an appearance at this point as well, too? Because we're seeing appearances from everyone else. We haven't seen an appearance from Catherine Janeway. We did see an appearance of, quote-unquote, Tuvok. Again, spoilers, Tuvok. And so that's kind of interesting to see as well, too. So it'll be interesting to see what the writers are going to do for the next couple of episodes and seeing how they end off the season at this point, or end off the series as well, too. But with that, I'll leave it at that. I didn't mean to spoil things, and again, this is me just talking about more so about the aspect of Picard season 3, how it is. I mean, I've gone off a little bit differently from my normal videos at this point, quite honestly. And if you enjoyed my talk, if you like the video, please hit the like button. If you don't like it, you're welcome to dislike it. But I also ask, please leave your comments in the comment section. I do read them. I do respond to them. And if you have, if you think, what do you guys think will happen with the next 2 episodes? And what do you think of this season, basically, so far? Do you think maybe Wesley Crusher will be making an appearance? Do you think Cisco will make an appearance? Because, that is something that has been left that's been something left, open-ended and unresolved. I think a lot of fans would love to see what happened to Captain Cisco, and, as far as will we see Ben Cisco make a reappearance or somewhere in some form? And the aspect of also, will we see something about Discovery somewhere tying into this as well, too? Because Discovery shot into it, and it's in the same timeline at this point. It is much more farther into the future than, Picard. So it's kind of curious to see what will happen with that. Will they make a reference in next season to this at that point as well, too? And possibly, too, could there be a possibility of Wesley Crusher making an appearance on Discovery, or Jake Cisco, Ben Cisco for that matter as well, too? I don't know. But with that, like I said, let me know your thoughts, and also if you like my clips or videos, for that matter, or like this channel, please subscribe. I do, and I would love to eventually do a multi-stream, shared stream basically, and discuss with other people, with shows, tech related, show related, or even sports related for that matter, of course, too, as if you've seen some of my videos about this stuff as well, too. So I'd love to talk to people, but I'm not there yet with the number of subscribers, but it'd be great for more subscribers, the better for me and better for you if you do enjoy my videos. But I suggest you don't turn on the notify button on. You don't need to be notified when I post it. I mean, I post every now and then randomly. If you want to see my live, okay, then you could turn it on. I'm only doing that once a week right now. I'll try to do it more often, but it's kind of hard to do through my laptop considering I'm busy working and whatnot, and as well as the fact is it is a Surface, Microsoft Surface, not the laptop, but more of the Surface itself, the tablet, and it's not that great. I probably would want to do it on my phone anyways. The other aspect is you probably see me, live streaming from a sporting event once I get that through my phone eventually, by F4, one of the Formula One races, as well as, baseball games, as well as, hockey games. I would have loved to have streamed, parts of it for not the playoffs, but when the Knicks were playing the Clippers. I would have loved to stream it. I was at that game. I took video, but unfortunately, turns out my phone was out of space, and I was like, damn it, and I didn't realize it, and it was too late at that point. So unfortunately, that was my own that was my goof up at that point. But anyways, if I streamed it, it'd probably been a different story. But anyways, at that, like I said, I welcome feedback, open criticism about my channel, about my videos. Please leave them there. I will read them. I do take them to heart. I do want to be better at this. And I know I'm all over the board. And of course, if you see my shorts are relatively non-related to what I talk about. Maybe it will tie them in eventually one time down the line. Maybe there might be a video about some humor at that point, some jokes or some quote unquote dad jokes, which are some, like not that great. But in any case, I'll leave it at that. Unfiltered, unedited, and unrehearsed. Until next time.